The world remembers what it wants to remember. But sometimes, the things it tries to forget scream the loudest. And tonight, we follow that scream back to a kingdom of fire, brilliance, and blood. A kingdom whose treasures were stolen, scattered, silenced, yet still alive. Still waiting. These are the Benin Bronzes. Long before their names were whispered in foreign museums, long before the world pretended to discover African art, the Kingdom of Benin stood as one of the most sophisticated civilizations on Earth. Its walls stretched farther than the Great Wall of China. Its streets were lit with torches, perfectly planned, and at its heart stood a palace so vast, so intricate, so alive with bronze, ivory, and coral, that European visitors struggled to believe what they were seeing. Because the Benin Kingdom did not merely rule, it created. Every Oba, every king, was immortalized in metal. Their stories carved into plaques that lined the palace like a living archive. Court artists worked with a precision that defied time. They cast bronze using techniques Europeans would not master for centuries. They sculpted ivory with sacred reverence, turning tusks into masterpieces. These were not just objects. They were memory, identity, ancestry, a complete historical record told through the hands of master guilds who passed their secrets from father to son. That is what the Benin Bronzes truly are, not souvenirs, not tribal art, but a library of a people, a library made of metal and bone. But every library has its destroyer, and in 1897, destruction came wearing a British uniform. The tension had been building for years. Britain wanted control, control of trade, control of palm oil, control of territory, and they wanted the Oba to bend. But Benin was not a kingdom that bent easily. So when a British delegation ignored repeated warnings not to enter Benin during a sacred festival, a confrontation erupted. Some died. The British Empire called it an attack. But history remembers it as the excuse they had been waiting for. Within weeks, an invasion force was assembled, a full-scale military assault on a kingdom that had done nothing but defend its sovereignty. They called it the Punitive Expedition of 1897. Punitive, as if Benin were a child to be punished, not a nation fighting for its life. When the British soldiers reached Benin City, they unleashed fire on a scale the kingdom had never seen. Homes were burned, shrines were smashed, innocent people were killed, and then came the looting. Systematic, methodical, cold. They moved through the royal palace like men possessed, ripping bronzes from walls, prying ivory tusks from altars, stacking centuries of sacred heritage into piles like firewood. Some soldiers later wrote proudly in their journals how they filled wagons with treasures, how they packed crates with bronzes to sell, how the palace, one of Africa's greatest architectural wonders, was set ablaze, its flames rising high enough to scorch the heavens. By the time the smoke cleared, Benin City was gone. Not defeated, erased. Thousands of bronzes left the kingdom in chains just as its people once did. They were auctioned off in London to cover the cost of the invasion. Imagine that. The victim paying for the crime. Museums from the British Museum to institutions in Germany, France, the United States, and beyond scrambled to buy pieces. Collectors fought over them. Scholars praised them as astonishing. And for the first time, Europe acknowledged the genius of African art, but only after stealing it. The silence that followed was almost as brutal as the theft. For decades, textbooks lied. Museums displayed the bronzes without telling the truth. Scholars invented theories suggesting that Benin could not possibly have created such sophisticated works, that maybe they came from the Portuguese or from some lost civilization. Anything but admit that Africans, in their own kingdom, forged masterpieces that rivaled the Renaissance. The truth was buried under racism, denial, and deliberate distortion. And the world moved on. pretending the bronzes had always belonged in glass cases under European lights. But stolen things remember their home. In the late 20th century, voices began to rise: Nigerian artists, historians, activists, traditional leaders. They demanded answers. They demanded justice. They demanded repatriation. The world pushed back. Museums argued that returning the bronzes would set a dangerous precedent. They claimed they were protecting world heritage. They spoke as if they owned time itself. Yet the pressure grew, and with every passing year, the lie cracked a little more. Today, the fight for repatriation is louder than ever. Nigeria has built museums and cultural centers ready to house the returned pieces. International organizations have acknowledged the injustice. Even some Western institutions have begun returning artifacts, not out of guilt alone, but because the truth is no longer containable. But still, many hold on. The British Museum remains one of the largest hoarders of stolen Benin bronzes. Germany, despite agreeing to return many, still has collections spread across its institutions. Belgium, France, the United States, Austria, and others continue to hold pieces in their national museums, private collections, and university archives. Some institutions claim legal ownership based on century-old theft. Others pretend the debate is complicated. But nothing is complicated about a robbery. The bronzes belong to Benin, to the descendants of the kingdom that created them, to the ancestors who forged their stories into metal. They belong to the soil where the palace once stood, to the people whose spirits still guard the ruins. They do not belong to those who burned a kingdom, to the ground and sold its memories to the highest bidder. They do not belong to those who built entire museum wings from the ashes of another man's home. They do not belong to those who hide behind paperwork while standing on stolen history. The bronzes know where they come from, and so do we. The story of the Benin Bronzes is not just a tale of art. It is a tale of violence, silence, and resistance. A tale of a kingdom that refused to be forgotten, and a reminder that history is not always written. It is taken, controlled, manipulated, buried, but not forever. Because tonight, you heard it. The weight of what was stolen, the truth that refuses to die, and the voices of ancestors calling for justice. If this story moved you, then let it be more than a story. Let it be a spark. Like this video. Subscribe to Dark African Chronicles. We uncover the histories the world tried to bury. And in the comments, tell us, which African story should we expose next? The past is watching, and it's waiting for someone to listen.